We are so pleased to have a group with us this afternoon who's going to talk to us about the realities of getting these things done, and have had tremendous successes. So I'm going to introduce them one by one, and then they'll take the show from there. First of all, I want you to meet, many of you know him from being on our campus previously, Mayor Dan Mathieson, the mayor of Startford, Ontario. Dan Mathieson is in his third term as mayor of Startford, Ontario. He chairs the Southwest Economic Alliance, was the key mover in Startford being recognized as a top 7 intelligent community 2011 and 2012 by the Intelligent Community Forum. He's very special to Walsh University as our keynote speaker and launcher of our institute, and we are very excited that we have borrowed his triple helix story for our session this afternoon. Many of us have now made the trip to Startford, and it is real, what he tells you. Wonderful place, and he has been the champion of their re-energization. So please welcome Mayor Dan Mathieson. Yeah. By the way, I think we're supposed to call him Your Worship. Am I correct? Your Worship. Yes. Yeah, you like that, right? Yeah, yeah. Okay.
My mom never did.
Okay. Okay. Also, I'd like you to meet, some of you know him from last evening, Mr. Steve Reneker, the CIO for the City of Riverside and the Executive Director for SmartRiverside, where he helped to elevate the City of Riverside to the top 10 in the nation for Best of the Web and also the Digital City Survey. He oversees programs to attract and retain high-tech companies in Riverside and operates a citywide wireless internet project with digital inclusion that provides free training, PCs, internet for low-income families in Riverside. Also, in conjunction with those programs, he's been recognized as, Riverside's been recognized as one of the top 21 most intelligent cities in the world, and we were all excited to celebrate with him last evening because Riverside is this year's most intelligent community in the world. Please welcome Steve Reneker, CIO, Riverside. Okay. And apologize. We also have with us Mr. Lev Gonick, Dr. Lev Gonick, Vice President for Information Technology Services and Chief Information Officer at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio. He is co-chair of the CIO Executive Council's Higher Education Committee and co-chair of Cisco's Higher Education Executive Exchange. In 2004, he and Case Western Reserve University founded what is today known as One Community, the award-winning regional community network now reaching 22 counties in Northeast Ohio. He received the 2010 National Association of Telecommunications Officers and Advisory Annual Award for Community Visionary of the Year. In 2009, Case Western Reserve University began extending gigabit fiber to the home in Cleveland's inner city, much of this because of the championing efforts of Mr. Lev Gonick. Okay. And we have back with us the gentleman who was with us this morning, Dr. Rick Miller, Superintendent, Riverside Schools. He's had an entire career focused on school reform and improved student achievement in diverse settings. He's co-founded a collaborative assistance program for teachers and administrators and concentrated his organizational efforts on building more collaborative structures within our school organizations. Co-founder of the Mountain West Superintendent's Roundtable, where they created a think tank, is also one of the founders of the California School Reform Groups that we'll be soon learning how it fended on the 2012 general election ballot. I ask you to please welcome back Dr. Rick Miller. And then, of course, co-founder of the Intelligent Community Forum, Lou Zacharilla, a social entrepreneur who's credited with initiating this global intelligent community movement. As one of the founders, he studies ways to energize communities for our new century. He developed the Top 7 in Intelligent Community Year Awards program, and through this New York-based ICF, he helps community thought leaders to understand and implement the best practices of the world's leading communities. We are very proud that he is a graduate of Walsh University. Please welcome Mr. Lou Zacharilla.
Okay, thank you, Jackie. Thank you so much. And thank you, Rich, and thanks to all my colleagues here at Walsh. It's just great to be here and in this space, which is a new space, the Center for the Arts, which is also the temporary home for the Intelligent Community Institute. So you can go there and see my office. I think Derek put some footballs and baby toys there, so you're going to have to move those, but I do that. I also have a music stand here, so we'll be maybe singing a little bit later. Or I'll conduct, you sing. And that's what I do, actually. One of the students asked me, he says, what's your job? And I said, well, I kind of go around the world and I have conversations with really smart people who try to figure out how to make cities better. And he said, you get paid for that? I said, yeah, it's a real job. You can actually do that. It's called Make an Inquiry. What we're going to do today, we've talked over the last day and a half, in many ways theoretically, about what it means to develop better educational ideas that will ultimately improve communities. And we've talked about how to make communities more intelligent, and I think we've picked a lot of that stuff up from the ether and from the discussions and the talks. What I'd like to do now is just roll out for you exactly what the outcome is when someone picks up the ideas that we have at the intelligent community, takes them back to their community, plants the seed, and begins to develop an intelligent community. So each of these communities has been designated as intelligent, and they've all been doing the types of things that constitute the intelligent community movement. So this is real time, a real example of the outcome of an intelligent community. And of course, the role of the Institute, one of the roles, will be to become a go-to place so that any community in this region, or any community in the country if they want, can come here and learn the principles of the intelligent community, how to become an intelligent community, and then go back home and do exactly what these gentlemen did, which is to build a great place for the future. So, for those of you who represent communities in Stark County and the communities around here, this is really, in many ways, for you, because you will now be able to, as they say in the South, go to school on the best and the brightest that we can find around the world for you. So that's what we're going to do today. Now, we're going to concentrate this, we're going to try to concentrate this in two areas, our discussion. And it's just going to be sort of a barroom discussion, because we're usually drunk together anyway. Yeah, the Stumble Inn isn't here anymore.
Worship.
Oh, his worship, yes. Two areas we're going to concentrate on. The first one is the secret sauce, okay? I'm going to give you the secret sauce today, so close the doors, right? Secret sauce. Wherever we go, we're all asked the same question. How do these communities do it? How do these, quote, no-name communities, Stratford, right, Riverside, the communities of Northeast Ohio, how do they become intelligent communities? How in the world did they get there? Did the federal government drop billions of dollars in? Right? Did Santa Claus come one night? Was there some magic potion? Well, the secret sauce is this. It's genetic. They've created new DNA for themselves. And they call it the triple helix. And this is a concept which, of course, the mayor has written about, which was actually promulgated first in Holland within a couple of our intelligent communities there. The triple helix is a very, very simple concept. Right? If you think of the double helix, you're going to add a strand here. It's the government sector, local government, the academic sector, right, and the private sector, all winding themselves together, breaking down whatever it is that separates them, and working together to evolve something completely new in a community. Not brand new, because they reach back into their cultures, they reach back into their strengths, as Kristen and Norm was talking about today, to rediscover a new voice for those old truths. So when we talk about the triple helix, we're really talking about collaboration Because common sense, again, everything we do here is common sense. Common sense would lead you to conclude that the only way that government, academia, and the private sector can get this done is by collaborating. Easier said than done, evidently. Not in these places. Well, maybe at the beginning, as they'll tell us. But it's easy. You have to collaborate. So that's the secret sauce. That's what we're going to be looking at, and we're going to talk about the many, many different ways that sauce is used in the cooking of a community. We're going to try to guide this around the 5 basic principles of the intelligent community. Now, we do have a method. It isn't just going around and talking and asking questions. We do have a method for designating whether a community is really an intelligent community or on its way to becoming one. Okay? Now, very quickly, the 5 criteria for anyone out there that wants to become an intelligent community and fill out our nomination form and go through the process that these folks went through is you have to have adequate broadband or access communications. You have to have a knowledge workforce or a workforce that is moving itself and its next generation toward the middle class, right? We've heard a lot about what it means now to have a fragmented middle class. We hear it now in the political dialogue. I don't think people really know how to solve the problem. These communities do, though, and we kind of look at how they do it. The third thing is innovation, okay? Innovation, we're going to look at it a lot in the public sector. The private sector does okay in that area. The public sector is just beginning to pick it up, and these 4 gentlemen, if nothing else, are terrific innovators. The fourth thing is digital inclusion. Norm got asked a question near the end of the session by President Jusson about bringing the least among us along, and can we do it? There's no question we can do it. And if we don't get it done in this generation, shame on us. We, as they used to say in Star Trek, we have the technology. We can do this now, but we actually mandate it. And if a community isn't moving along and trying to include everyone on its new digital environment, then it's going to be very difficult for them to be called an intelligent community. And the fifth thing is advocacy and marketing. You know what marketing is, right? It's telling your story to other people so that they'll come and visit you and do business with you. So even if you're great, you have to tell people how great you are. You have to tell your story to the rest of the world. So we look at how well they do that. And then we look at advocacy. And advocacy, again, we go back to the triple helix. Advocacy is how well do you tell your stories to yourselves. The best tribes, and we're all tribes, every community is a tribe, the best tribe reinforces its story time and time again. It advocates for itself. It continues to communicate its own values, its own strengths, its own direction, its own destiny, its own God, its own beliefs in terms of where it wants to go. And then it all agrees. And there's nothing more powerful than a tribe on the warpath. And we've got 4 that are really on the warpath and riding hard right now. So that's how we're going to sort of break this discussion down. I'm going to ask them about their collaboration, how they achieve that new triple helix, and I'm going to go step by step through each of those 5 criteria for you so that you really get a sense of what happens inside one of these places. I'm going to start with our elected official, my friend Mayor Mathieson. And Dan, if we can, call you Dan. You have sort of a unique situation there with regard to the relationship between your utility and the city and the private sector. But give us a little insight as to how broadband, and the broadband railroad, as we call it, evolved in your town and how it began to lead you down the path toward becoming an intelligent community. So just tell us your story.
Sure. So Stratford, as a community, owns our own hydro assets and our own data utility company. We took an opportunity, and it starts in 1997. We did a strategic plan called 2010 and Beyond of what the community wanted to be. We wanted to be a community of excellence with worldwide impact. We wanted to embrace ICT, information, communications, and technology, as an enabler for economic development, and we wanted to attract a post-secondary institution. Coupling that and putting that as the lens on when you look at making decisions as government, we decided then that every decision we had to make, we had to keep those main guideposts in our eyes. So in 1999, when the province, or in your case the state government, said to us, okay, we have 440 utilities in the province of Ontario. Cities, you can sell them off, you can keep the money. sell it to private interest, do whatever you want, just get rid of them if you want, but we don't need 400 and some of you anymore. Our community of 32,000 people went out and bought the hydro assets of 6 other communities. Because when we put the lens of ICT on, we understand that in the future economy, access to redundant, reliable electric power was going to be key. At the time back then, ICT was of course a big power hog. It's even more so today, even with the iterations of power consumption and savings that they found. That's going to be one of the drivers if you're going to have ICT in the future. So we went out and bought the assets of these 6 other communities. And then we turned around and took those dividends that we receive on them, and 5% of our tax levy is offset by the dividends from the hydro company that we take for that. But the rest of the money, we then started to invest in laying fiber throughout our community. We have some, put it in perspective for you, about 40 miles of fiber in our community. And the city did it, and we strategically ran it as a backbone and a spine off in different directions to get to every corner of the community. We linked up different industries. We linked up all the government offices, the hospitals. We did all those things. And as we kept moving forward, we kept the lens of being an ICT-type community, hydroelectric power, getting on the railway. Stratford used to be one of the large railway centers, not like Chicago was, but for Ontario, we were the largest one at one time. And they went away. So we understood that the broadband economy was going to be run on a railway, but it was going to be fiber. And we wanted to make sure we're on it. We also made sure that we lobbied to be redundant in 2 different directions, because being able to have your information get out to the world is always going to be important. And somewhere, somebody on a backhoe is going to cut a fiber cable someday, and that information can't be lost. Connectivity can't be lost, and it has to find a new route. So we're redundant into 5 major markets out of Stratford in 2 different directions. And so we're moving along. We've got that idea. So next thing comes along is smart meters. Province says everybody's going to have a smart meter at their house because we want people to see what energy they're using in real time in their home. And you're going to have to put this smart meter in that allow us to send that information back. Well, when we put the lens of ICT on, there was 3 ways you could do that. One was yesterday's technology, which would be a megahertz radio system within each meter. The second would be to put a cellular chip in each meter and almost make it like a typical basic cell phone to call out the information. Or the third was to create a ubiquitous Wi-Fi coverage over the entire city using the fiber that we've laid as the whole concept. When you think about digital inclusion now, you say, well, if we do the Wi-Fi and we do it that way, we put 300 access points, Motorola, Norm's not here, I don't think, so I can say that word now, Motorola. Motorola, your competitor. Anyways,
you okay with that, Norm?
802.11n network. So we were the first cold climate deployment because we decided we were going to create ourselves a living lab, and we put this Wi-Fi network in, and now it's paid for by utility rates, which the province mandated to send this information back. But now we had this huge tool that allowed us to go out and give digital inclusion to every resident, to give them the access to the internet, and to start allowing us to broadcast our information out. And that's what we did with our utility by making first a strategic plan and putting those lenses on, but then successively making decisions and investments that enabled the growth on the original plan and building it out. I could go on for a while about the living lab concept. We have at this time probably about 8 or 9 international companies from Asia, Europe, and anywhere in North America that are in our community testing out their products. Toshiba will be there next week for 2 days with a delegation of 14 people from Japan because we've been testing out different smart meter, LED light technology, and solar technology for them. And they're coming now to harvest the data off of our network. And one of the conditions was that we got to use that information, and if at the end of the day the product works, we get a really good crack at it, not only either free or at discounted rates, but it also moves our community up a bit. And it allows us to compete in a far more global area. Lou, I think I'll just stop there because it's a pretty good idea.
Just to follow up, Dan, on that, because that's that's a sort of a technical overview, of course. A follow-up question, though, is okay. Just quickly, now once you had that broadband in, what was the advantage? What have been some of the outcomes from that, obviously? And I'm just leading you into the Royal Bank of Canada deal, but
sure.
Had you not had it, I guess it would be a different world. So let's just break that down quickly.
A couple of things have happened. Because we had broadband connectivity, Scotiabank, the 3rd largest bank in the country, hosts its national mortgage and, of course, auto loan division there. So we were able to entice an inflow of jobs that were technologically based. We were able to compete when the Royal Bank of Canada, the largest bank in the country, fifth largest in the world, was going to build its national data center. We competed against 200 other communities and convinced them to come to Stratford. They built a 400,000 square foot, $400 million data center within our community. And the reason they did it is because we had had the foresight to lay the fiber, to have redundant electric power, to have smart switches on it that allow it that the redundancy or the reliability of our power is 99.9%. So they were really excited about it. We enticed the University of Waterloo, and Dr. Fenton's here from that, but through conversations with them, they built their digital media university campus in Stratford because we had the broadband connectivity, we had the creative class, and of course the culture, which is all about content in the future economy. Those are some of the real tangibles. Another one to think about, though, is when we were redeveloping our hospital with the idea that ICT, that people in small rural and urban settings want to have the best health care available, our hospital is completely wired so that now we have lab tests done in our lab or sent away and come back electronically. Every doctor carries a tablet. Every doctor's office is completely wired to the hospital. On weekends, when we were trying to entice radiologists to come to our community, they said, look, I don't want to work weekends and nights. That's what happens in small communities. We actually have x-rays read in our community on weekends by a doctor's lab in Australia, and they send us electronically. We send them the images, they look at them and send them back. And we're able now to talk about a quality of life that is unparalleled with access to medical, education, fiber, all the things that Norm highlighted at lunch that are key drivers for economic success. Now we're getting those lone eagles, those people that want to plant their seeds and come in, and that's what taking that concept over a period of time and making decisions with that lens really means.
So it just changed lives, it changed the economic life of the community, and it even made Justin Bieber famous, one of your famous residents, because he was able to post his audition video on YouTube, right?
Yeah, true story. 11 years old, it was busking out front of one of the city's 4 theaters. His mother videotaped it, sent it online, became viral. One of the radio executives in Atlanta, Georgia saw it, called him up, invited him and his mother down to audition, and the kid now is the highest grossing pop star this year and last in the world, started as a YouTube sensation, singing on a street, but with the power of broadband connectivity.
And sold out Madison Square Garden in 16 seconds.
Yeah. Time and place mean nothing now because broadband takes you to any space you need to be.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. And of course, most guys my age would love his little black book, but he became famous, and broadband enabled that culture to go forward. Lev, a little bit of a different situation up in Cleveland. You guys found yourselves in rather desperate economic straits. You looked around the landscape, and again, you came to the conclusion that broadband was going to be critical for Cleveland to mobilize the assets that were remaining, mobilize its knowledge, and to push forward into a new renaissance or an attempt at that. Tell us how that happened and who you had to collaborate with to get that done.
Sure, thanks. Let me just sort of begin by sharing that working together in this private-public partnership along with a lot of community assets, Northeast Ohio enjoys one of the largest broadband infrastructures in the world as a community. Not as a utility owned by a private sector, but actually by the community. It touches some 2,500. You heard the mayor say that in his town there are 40 miles or so of fiber. Today, in Northeast Ohio, across the 23 counties, we have over 2,500 route miles of fiber connecting some 3,200 facilities, schools, museums, libraries, hospitals, government buildings, and the like. So let's tell you the story in short. Yep. This audience knows as well as I do the story of Northeast Ohio and the challenges that we have faced over the last 25 years, moving from essentially a challenge of the devolution of the traditional economies that made us what we were once upon a time, the Silicon Valley of a different era, into a situation of really trying to figure out what we were going to be next. And the ability to reimagine and then reinvent the community around us became essentially the task of figuring out where the pieces and the parts were going to come together. And one of the things I want you to be thinking about, especially those of you who have thought about but perhaps not been down this road together, is that there are any number of important catalysts for this effort. You've heard an outstanding example of when government has the vision, steps up, and knows how to weave the elements of the community. The story in Cleveland is a little bit different. It starts with the public sector, not the government part of the public sector, but with the public organizations, namely schools, museums, libraries, public broadcasting, coming together and basically saying, right, our future in Cleveland is intimately connected to broadband. If there is a future for Northeast Ohio, it is intimately connected to broadband. And that is because the biggest challenges are not between Cleveland and Canton. The biggest challenges are between Cleveland and Canton, China. And we have to figure out how to stop, as it were, figuring out that the competition is in our backyard and realizing that we're really in a global environment. And so 10 years ago, we began this journey of trying to create a co-op, aggregating all of the broadband needs of all of the public sector institutions, schools, museums, libraries, hospitals, governments together, just one big cooperative activity. Today, Northeast Ohio consumes through one community almost 200 gigabits per second of bandwidth, which is unsurpassed in the Great Lakes region. And that is because we all started with the assumption that all we needed was to basically get a better price per bit in order to kind of drive down the cost so that the bean counters would be happy with what we technology people were doing. But once we realized that we were getting connected together, it became not a matter of price per bit, but actually realizing what was possible with those bits. And so the hospital systems in Cleveland, the Cleveland Clinic, the university hospitals, all of them are connected to one community. That's the name of the organization, one community. And they started with really just having, again, all of them had, if we think about this in terms of highway lanes, they all had a couple of 1.5 lane highways, T1s, 1.5 lanes. And then they grew it to 10 lanes, and then to 100 lanes, and then to 1,000 lanes. And today, University Hospitals just last week signed a multi-year agreement with one community to create 10,000 lanes of broadband connectivity for the 23 facilities that are part of the University Hospital system. That's 10 gigabits per second connectivity. And again, it's driven by not only the price point, but also the opportunity to collaborate and cooperate, not only for healthcare systems, not only for education systems, not only for government services, but actually the cross-boundary activities that would not have been possible without the broadband. Libraries in Cleveland are now providing support and care for docent training for museums. We just demonstrated 2 weeks ago an excellent example of the Cleveland Clinic offering science education to inner city school kids in science education with live surgeries going on at the Cleveland Clinic interactively with school kids, asking questions of the surgeons while they're doing heart surgery. Yeah. Talk about getting turned on to what science can provide. We created opportunities for post-surgical interactions between doctors and senior citizens. Senior citizens actually offering science classes and music classes to students in the inner city of Cleveland. Crossing the boundaries are made possible because at this point, right, it's not the brick and mortar of the buildings that separate us. It's really just our imaginations, and they're more porous than anything else. And the broadband, certainly in Northeast Ohio, is more available than just about anywhere else. And so our journey, the journey that we've been working on for the last 10 years, and more recently delivering these services directly into the homes of individuals, has really been an extraordinarily exciting effort of, again, finding the right institutions in your community that can champion, that can help catalyze the vision, that can convene those conversations like the Institute is going to be doing here. And then, again, persistence. I bet you every one of the speakers up here is going to say persistence. It's not only Teflon that you have to have on the outer shell. You've got to be willing to stick it out and take the barbs from everybody who says it can't be done, it shouldn't be done. Right? There's no way it could happen here. The answer is, of course it can happen here. It's just a matter of your imagination and your will to help reimagine and then reinvent your community. Exactly,
and bringing the champions to the table together, even though they may be in disparate parts of the economy and different parts of the community. And that's important too. And again, getting down to where it really matters, human life. I sat through one of those Cleveland Clinic live heart surgery performances. And we were sitting there with a room this size with inner city kids in white lab coats. And you would think, you know, kids watching a really messy, it was a mitral valve replacement with a Da Vinci device. You would think kids would be squeamish or they'd be, you know, kind of monkeying around. They were so focused. And the questions that were coming from these kids to that doctor were staggering. And you could tell that some of these kids who may not have thought about ever going into medicine, certainly at the level of a surgeon, all of a sudden we're beginning to believe.
Lou, let me finish the story, because
Yeah.
Lou, you were in town, I'm going to say almost 4 or 5 years ago now for that.
That was now.
Right? This year, Case Western Reserve University graduated its first medical school student who came directly out of the Collingwood High
kidding.
School program.
I didn't know that.
A partnership with Cleveland Clinic, the Cleveland Metropolitan School System, and Case Western Reserve on a free ride
Nice.
for being at the top of the class. And that's kind of turning young people who would otherwise probably have no imagination of the possible.
Well, yeah, and you never know. Exactly. And now there's a life that is not just going to do well, right, in medical school, but they're also going to create social capital. They're going to give back. They're going to be an inspiration. So those things have snowball effects. So you say to yourself, you know, what's the point of the broadband exercise? Because it just sounds like a lot of technological gook. But this is where it has the impact that it would not have had if these
It's
folks...
all about changing people's life
Yep.
and improving the quality of the lives in our communities. And that's something that we can all participate in, whether we're technological, political, social, or entrepreneurial, or some combination of all.
Exactly. We all have the same interest. Moving to the West Coast, it's had some similar challenges. We heard from Steve last night about how they were able to build their network, but I asked Rick to join us with Steve because, again, you've got the Chief Innovation Officer and a Chief Technology Officer, effectively, and you've got the head of schools. And again, these are not necessarily two positions that you would assume would be collaborating and talking to one another. Steve, Rick, either one of you can go, or if you can sync it, you can talk together. Tell us a little bit about your collaboration and how Riverside, again, under Mayor Loveridge, was able to bring disparate folks, but, you know, true change agents together to make the change that ultimately led to being Intelligent Community of the Year.
Well, I'll start, and then, Rick, you can maybe tie into the
I can
details how you
finish.
made it happen. But, you know, it came down to, I was talking last night about, you know, Microsoft came to the table with $50,000. Intel kind of gave us the inspiration to do digital inclusion. And so we gave it a shot. We started training. We started training with really students at the college level to actually train in the digital inclusion classes. And to be really frank, nothing to say with the college students, but a lot of them just weren't good instructors. They were good technologists. So feedback wasn't that great from the citizens there. We knew we were kind of struggling with it. But the most important part we knew is we were going to expire that $50,000 at some point, and the condition of the grant was you can't reapply. So we had to figure out how to self-sustain ourselves. And so we were very, very lucky that the schools actually reached out to us before it expired and said, hey, you know, we have this issue in our schools where we have students during the day that in many cases have libraries with no computers in them. If you could outfit our labs with refurbished computers, they could use them during the day. We could use them as training labs, and then when they threw out, and we could train for free. That was just like music to my ears. Right. And I knew we were on the road to doing something much greater.
I think the other part of that
Why'd you reach out? Why did the schools reach out? I mean, what prompted that?
actually my predecessor was the one first involved in that.
Right.
But the other thing that began to happen, and I'm not sure exactly what our motivation is, but again, I think we have a good relationship with the city and we've worked on improving that. And there's a need, because it goes back to the earlier question about the digital divide. We know that there are parts of our community that aren't connected, where there are other parts that are very connected. So how do we deal with that? And we actually use SmartRiverside as a leverage point with grants, because the question is, going back to your question earlier today, what are you going to do about the digital divide? Well, we do a variety of things. One is we provide devices in those schools that have the greatest need Doesn't mean other schools, other students don't have needs, but those have the greatest need. The second question is, well, that works at school because you have a wireless, and we could dial it up in terms of the infrastructure and so forth. But the other side of that is what happens when they walk off the campus. Well, when they walk off the campus, we have SmartRiverside that instantly connects that way, as well as we're looking at other options to give kind of a cafeteria list of options, because not all of them work exactly the same. And this may be more robust in this place, but less so over here. So we have to keep building those kinds of things. And then we've created, to some degree, an internal broadband capacity I mentioned this morning of putting a cache server inside of our school and creating cache software. So when the students walking in and about the campus, they're uploading and downloading textbooks, PowerPoints from the teachers, redundancy with the work they've done, so if something happens to their device, it's still saved. So it's kind of a internet kind of approach to supplement the other. So you start to match all those pieces together. Kids have actually a great deal of access, but part of it is, how do we work with each other? How do we leverage each other? And I think that as we've gone forward, hopefully we're bringing value to SmartRiverside, but at the same time, they're bringing value to us, and we continue that conversation. And we started off, as I said this morning, we had no money. We still have no money. So almost all of this has been grants or trying to repurpose dollars that we have, those kinds of things, and we're up to 18,000 devices and continuing to grow. We don't see ourselves slowing down. And all the way along, we've always addressed the digital divide issue because we're focusing first in those areas.
That's all, yeah, that's always in the back of your minds there. Dan, did you want to add something there? Because I have another question for you, but go ahead.
Yeah, no,
I know Lev also, you want to jump in.
one of the things I was going to say, that I was impressed with the 6,000 computers and that the program they've run. What we've tried to do is, right now we have a pilot project with Research in Motion that make BlackBerry, and they have their playbook. And by this time next year, October 1st next year, every community or every home has to have an electronic thermostat that is interactive, that you can turn off a device, see your consumption go down, and all those pieces. And we have a project right now with Research in Motion that's two-headed. One, again, using the energy side of things. So instead of spending $250 and giving them a thermostat that sits on the wall, for the same $250, we can load, and we are loading and have loaded, software on a playbook, a tablet, and given them to these people. And we did it in low-income seniors, the non-traditional people that are going to have to use those not only as a heating device, but now actually use it as a digital literacy device where they can actually understand the broadband. And we had to do that because Lev's right. There's a lot of people out there go, this smart stuff, this is ridiculous. Like, it means nothing to us. But now that they actually see it in the context of their own home, but they actually get some intrinsic value and a device they maybe not otherwise would have bought, we're starting to see heads turn, and we're getting people saying, hey, when you roll out the next 1,000 homes, how do I get on that list first? How do I, so it's interesting, and it's one of the challenges, and we'd like to see it go to our school system, much like what you've done in Riverside, because that's the type of thing where the kids leave the school, go through downtown and come home. If it's seamless, you're going to see a bigger uptake in it.
Yeah. Lev, did you want to add something to that?
I'm going to let you ask questions or have folks here ask questions. There's a lot of stories to tell, and I'm just hoping that the stories that we're telling are ones that you'll resonate with or be able to make connections to. If I could I'll share one short one.
Okay.
Just on the healthcare side. 1 out of every 3 women in Cleveland has type 2 diabetes. That's an epic, right? It's an epic challenge, and it's a huge issue for healthcare. Well, how do you begin to think about addressing that? I'm going to try using the microphone to at least project. So 1 out of 3 women has type 2 diabetes. How do we come together as a community to begin to attend to it? And the opportunity really that presented itself in the context of the conversation we're having this afternoon was actually to come together and leverage the broadband infrastructure that allowed for not only the direct intervention. So today in the inner city, right around where our university is, kids who go to school, John Hay High School, right across the street from the university, are involved in a mobile cart project which allows them to wheel out a wireless video conferencing infrastructure that allows them to take it right onto the porch of their grandmother or their aunts, right? And literally that then connects directly to the healthcare provider. One project. The libraries are partnering with the school system so that the science curriculum is actually directly relevant to dealing with type 2 diabetes, and inside the libraries there's now essentially an opportunity to take your grandmother or your aunt or your mom, or maybe it's even your own healthcare record, and begin to track it directly, impactfully, and literally then start saying, how can I actually help my family? How can I help myself with their healthcare needs? And the answer turns out, I can't do it without the broadband infrastructure, so much so that in Ashbury, the neighborhood that is basically sandwiched between the university and the little neighborhood that I've been talking about, opened up a senior citizens computer training center on demand. It was a demanded issue. My grandkids are coming, showing me all this stuff off the internet from the library. I wanted to. Ashbury Community Center, Senior Community Center, run by Wanda Davis, who's an entrepreneur because she had to become one. She had no choice in the matter. Runs it, and actually was a recipient of a Cleveland Housing Network for the broadband initiative during the stimulus period of time. Together, collectively, Cleveland Housing Network scored for computer training in the inner city. Ready? $11.2 million. Right? And have a sustained program that once those grandparents or the kids or the grandkids finish the program, they get the computer, they get broadband for 3 years. And on reports, 62% of people who completed the program, 15,000 households in inner city Cleveland completed the program, report that they've either got an opportunity to apply for a job, start a business, or get a better job because they've actually been able to access that information over the internet. So there's this ecosystem that we're talking about that's part of the Intelligent Communities program. Some of it can be directed by governments, some of it can be directed by intelligent school orientations, and some of it can be based on community engagement in a kind of organic way that then brings in the other pieces and parts. I'd like you to think about the different models that make sense to you and your community.
Right, and that's the description of what Norm was talking about, true growth, right? It comes from within, right? You're mobilizing all the resources inside and you're just bringing them together. If we can get a microphone, I see a couple of people
Ready to go.
have their hands up. Larry, I think you had your hands up first.
Hello, my name is Jonathan, and I'm all for the digital age. I think it needs to come. In fact, in many ways, we're behind.
Well, we're glad we fed you then.
But I also come from a correctional background, and I always look at the devious side and privacy issues. Now we have the technology. If you take a photo of your son or daughter in their bedroom, you can tag that and you post it on Facebook. Criminals can find out, if you don't disable, where the bedroom is and the address of that home very easily. How do we go about, in this new brave age, protecting the privacy of everybody and hackers and all that, and what is your responsibility in that?
Hello, there we are. We've dealt with that because we have SIPA laws to deal with that, which typically has to do with filtering. And so the school response nationally has been, we filter everything. And so basically when we talk about YouTube, there is no YouTube. You can't get to it. We've taken a different approach, and actually we're working with the FCC. They've given us a grant. They gave us 1.2, and we leveraged and doubled that into about $2.5 million. But our conversation is that, no, we're going to open up our system. But at the same time, we're going to talk about digital citizenship. So we specifically have orientation process with both parents and with students, and we have a progressive discipline program to deal with it, because you're absolutely correct. And I don't know that we can ever filter enough to get to where we have to go. We have to have responsible citizenship of people doing the right thing and the right level of expectations, no matter who you are and where you are. So that's the level of the conversation. And part of the way my colleague Jay describes it as he's giving these devices to kids, he says, the adults don't think you can actually handle this. So he just says it straight out. And I think that's the right thing to be communicating to kids, so it's up to you to be a responsible citizen and move forward. So that's our approach to it, but it's one of those hotly contested issues, certainly in schools.
Rick, let me just sort of share a very similar story. In Cleveland, the U.S. Department of Justice had partnered with Case Western Reserve University and the Cleveland Metropolitan School System to provide 300 Barnes & Noble Nooks e-readers for 3 schools, basically middle school and high school, for all the curriculum. The average age of the textbooks, if they were available in the school, was 11 years old. Overnight, every child had a textbook, was able to take it home, which, by the way, you couldn't in the Cleveland school system. And obviously, there was only one challenge. They were internet enabled. And we had the same conversation that Rick's just described around, right, a lot of the adults, especially in the school system, said, well, you know, this could be real trouble. I mean, how do we know when they're here inside the garden wall, we can make sure that they don't get into trouble? But, I mean, these are internet devices. You want to send them home with these kids? I mean, what could happen? And, I mean, this could really be dangerous. And this is now a year and 2 months later, like happened last year at the beginning of the school year. Right? 0 incidents because the kids were challenged to do the right thing. There was really good digital literacy training that went on. And the challenge was laid down, that the adults don't think you'll know what to do with this, or what you're going to do with it may not be appropriate. The other small little piece, just in terms of another thing that the adults says, they're all going to just lose them. They're just gonna, you know, they throw everything, you know, everything just kind of gets left at the bus stop. 1 device out of the 300 was actually lost in the year and 2 months. So again, when it's something that's precious, something that is impactful, something that's desirable, you take care of it, and you do the right thing.
Yeah, and I'll throw this out to you guys. There's also the idea, there's a long-term and a short-term from what I learned from a few police departments in some of these communities. One is better policing, but what it means is, in St. John, New Brunswick, by the way, the police officers describe themselves to me as knowledge workers. So they're trying to use the tools of the knowledge economy to police citizenship. That's how they describe it, and they're using data, and they're trying to figure out ways to enable citizens to do, remember we talked about new voices for old truths, to enable citizens to become more trustful of each other, to be better citizens. The police actually think about this stuff. So again, as we evolve as communities, our law enforcement also is evolving in some of these places. And citizenship is the key. We're hoping that as these communities self-heal, all the elements of the great social collapse in America over the past 40 years also begins to heal with it. And when we trust each other, we watch out for each other. And we see a lot of crime going down in these places. Yeah, go ahead, Larry, you have a question?
I have a much more simple question going back to the practical hows and whats and how to do this. For example, I know at our university we have an average of 7,700 devices in action in any one day. How would a community go about with this triple helix? How would we be able to get together the right people that could tell us how many devices exist in this Stark County area or, you know, Canton area? What's the activity right now in the region to make any kind of sense of knowing where the hot spots are, where the voids are? How does a community get together with whom to say, who has to be around the table to kind of do an analysis of this community to say, what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, what are the problems of Canton, and what are the next steps? It seems like each of you have done this, maybe serendipitously, maybe not, but there's got to be a method in how does a community get around the table for that next discussion after this conference is finished?
I think the first thing you can do, at least in the United States, you can take a look at, get a GIS group and map Census 2010 data as a baseline, because that data tells you who has connections, what speed, and if they have a computer in the house or not. So you get some basic data from that. Then you can bring your carriers to the table. A geographic information system. So most organizations, cities and counties primarily, have a geographic information system, a mapping-based solution that has layers of all information. And one of those layers is census.
Larry's asking who will be the custodian of that information.
So yeah, this is generally run by a chief information officer. In the case of a county, it might be an assessor, you know, a planning department, something of that nature that would have that data. That would be the first place to check, because they're going to have a lot of rich content. And most of that's public data. and they'll easily share that. The next is to try to work with your carriers, but I will tell you that is not an easy proposition. Most of them won't share that information. They view it as proprietary, but if you end up with a carrier that does, that would help as well.
So just to add, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, no, Gaedla.
I was just going to say that the next question is not technical. The next conversation is not technical. This event, if it kicks off a line of conversation, should at an absolute minimum a series of conversations. One small one of which might be the technical conversation. As the guy who is proud to say I'm a propeller head. Right? We made a mistake in Northeast Ohio. I mean, it's one of the things that Lou wanted us to do is talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. We started thinking 10 years ago that this was a technology project. When technology melts away and becomes invisible and people's lives are transformed, you know you've actually accomplished something impactful. And the technology folks, what we needed to do, at least in our experience, was learn to step back, actually to give away this project that we understood somewhere in our mind's eye was going to be really important. But not to get carried away with the technology piece of it. The answers are actually multiple-fold when it comes to the technical issues. But what you and Canton enjoy is that you are in the footprint of, again, what I described as the nation's largest community-owned broadband effort, one community, and they can assist in the mapping of your immediate neighborhood. In University Circle in Cleveland, we chose to create a canopy of wireless connectivity. At the city airport, Case Western Reserve and one community provide, when you fly back out of here, a free wireless service again. In Akron, just up the way, there's 12 square miles of wireless that was done as a combination with the city and the public safety. But those were projects that evolved not from technical conversations. Right. Those were use cases about things that were going to be impactful, around things that were very local. So those are the conversations I'd encourage you to have next. That's
great, Lev. And because really, at the end of the day, we're not talking about technology. You're absolutely right. And I think all these guys will tell you that. We're talking about human outcomes, allowing human beings to realize their full destiny in the place that they choose to live. And that's really what's at stake here. And in Stockholm, our 2009 Intelligent Community of the Year, whenever they make a decision, especially as it relates to technology, and then they're real good at technology too, they always think about how it will positively impact the individual human being living in that community. That's where they start their analysis, at the human level. So Lev's exactly right. You start getting lost in the technology, and you really are in a race to nowhere. There's another question. Yes.
I have one. Hi. My name is Trisha Ostertag. I actually work for Arts in Stark, the County Arts Council here in Stark County. I'm also a PhD student at Akron in Urban Studies and a Walsh graduate, so excited to be here. But my question actually is for Mr. Mathieson. You said a buzz phrase for me in my dissertation study, which is creative class. And being from Ontario, obviously, you understand the whole Richard Florida, concepts and such. So I have two questions for you in relation to Stratford and possibly outreaching to these other communities. First of all, you have this dynamic workforce that is being drawn to your area. Number one, how do you accommodate the growth, to the community? And number two, what are your efforts towards placemaking for those residents once they've come into your community?
Well, you have to go back in time for Stratford's history. For those of you that don't know, in 1951, the Canadian National Railway announced they were going to leave and close the shops in Stratford. At the time, the population was 20,000 people, and 2,000 people were employed in the railway. Eeks, big problem. A guy by the name of Tom Patterson came up with the concept that we should start a Shakespeare theater in a park. And he came to City Council, Lou's heard the story, asked for $100 to go to New York City. He was going to meet with Tyrone Guthrie, the world-renowned director and actor at the time, to get him to come to Stratford. And at that time, the members of City Council, and the mayor just died a year and a half ago, he was 99 at the time, said, look, nobody goes to New York for $100. Here's $125. Good luck. Government threw around money back then, too. And Mayor Gregory told the story that everyone was scared. They didn't have a clue what they were going to do, and nobody was going to stand in the way. Today, 60 years later, so this is the 60th season of the Stratford Shakespeare Festival, we have 3,000 jobs directly and indirectly in our community are tied to that theater. It generates $140 million of GDP. and generates $70 million of taxation for all 3 levels of government. That's kind of the thing that comes out of this stuff. 50 years before that, though, in 1903, 1904, at the time the railway wanted to go around our park system and build a second railway yard right along the river. And a guy by the name of Thomas Orr, had led a group of businessmen, bought up all the parkland all around the river, and turned it over to the city on the condition they create a parks board and they not allow the commercialization of the parks. And he wasn't very popular at the time. But when you think back 50 years later, where did they build that tent for the theater? Right in the park. Stratford now has the largest parkland per capita of any city in Canada. It has a theater. It created a chef school in 1982 and turns out 40 award-winning chefs a year.
And how many people do you have again there?
32,000.
32,000. And a symphony orchestra.
A symphony orchestra. We have just announced yesterday, for the 3rd year in a row, our culinary festival, because we're in the heartland of agriculture in Canada. Our county is #1 in farm gate receipts. Over $1.7 million a day are generated either through pork, dairy, or chicken farmers within the
good kind of pork, by the way.
The good kind of pork, yeah. Not like the earmarks here. But anyways, that's another story. But so what's happened, though, is we thought we've got this rich agricultural piece. We've got people coming out. We have over 1 million visitors a year come to our community. We have 600,000 theater goers. But they don't know anything about our agricultural base. So we have every September now a 10-day culinary food festival where everything that is served, whether it's beer, wine, food, vegetables, are within 100 miles. And you wouldn't believe the number of people. This year we had 82,000 people in 10 days come to our community to celebrate agriculture. And that's the type of quality of life things that people now look at and they say, look, if I can work anywhere because I'm like Norm Jackness, I don't have an office. I don't need to live in a house that I had to pay $800,000 for and $15,000 a year in taxes. I can live out in a very nice community that has a symphony, a theater, parks, has food festivals, very low crime rate, technology. They come out to Stratford, and that's what we're starting to see now, people saying, I want a piece of that. Because the hurried life that you live on a smartphone with messages popping at you every 10 seconds or every 2 minutes, you kind of lose that when you're in that time and space in a small community setting. And that's really what we aim for. We're not looking to have the next Cisco Systems, IBM, or Apple in our community. I'd rather have 500 of the brightest entrepreneurs employing 50 people or less, because small business in North America is going to be the leading driver of economic input and output over the next 40 years. Yeah. And that's the way we need to start thinking. We can't think a big smokestack's going to solve our problem.
That's a good segue for us, Dan. Did he answer your question about handling the growth, though, adequately? Would you like to drill him a little bit on that? Sure. Well, I don't. I mean that in the nicest way possible.
Well, I mean, if you're talking, oh, thanks. Hi. You're talking about having 32,000 people, though, so we're not talking about a huge amount of people.
Well, our growth rate before a lot of this started to happen was about 3%, 2 to 3% a year.
Okay.
Provincial average is 4.5%. We've set a measured growth rate of 5% and no more in the next 20 years.
Okay.
We're not aiming to be a megalopolis, and we've really worked at making sure connectivity. So the provincial government there, we have what's called GO, Government of Ontario Trains. It's a commuter train system. Well, you can leave Kitchener, which is 30 minutes from my door to the station, and you can be in downtown Toronto in an hour and 5 minutes. We're going to have that train system in our community. And we're going to find ways on an ecological footprint to live. That's how we're going to manage our growth. We're not going to build bigger highways. We're not going to tear up farmland. We're really about keeping within our borders. We've annexed enough land. Our density, we've now mandated, has to be 8.5 housing units per acre. So we're not telling people they can have big, egomaniac houses. You got to live on the space you have, and that's what we're going to do.
Okay.
That's a really interesting, I've seen that done in different areas within the United States, but to see it done in even a smaller community in that way is great.
Yeah, smaller communities are going to, and small cities are going to dominate the economy and the discussion about community by the year 2050. I mean, there's no question in our mind about that. That's where it's headed. And don't let anybody tell you differently. Because because we can, right? Yeah. Logan Smalley had a great phrase this morning, and Dan, you segue us into it when you talk about the constant need to create jobs and social capital. He talked about infinitely agile, infinite agility, which is a skill that, again, that is embedded now in your communities because of the collaboration that's taken place. And, you know, my question as we move toward the discussion now about knowledge workers, we know that knowledge work is going to require an increasing degree, and it's great that we're in a music setting, of creativity within every individual citizen. When I walk around Eindhoven or Suwon, South Korea, you know, I get the message that we're all creative here. We're not afraid to create. So the technology is just like turning on a light switch for them. We don't even have the discussion about broadband in these places. What we have a discussion about is what happens when the lights go on. Then it gets really exciting. How have you guys approached that knowledge workforce that's going to be required? I know in Riverside, in the area of the environment and so forth, the mayor talks about the Green Prairie Fire that got started there. You want to take us through any of that or talk a little bit about the knowledge workforce creation? Steve or Rick?
Well, I think the key to our economic success really is a relationship with the university, and having a research university for us is key. And in really trying to go and identify what researchers there really have some item or some material item, service or whatever that can be patentable is key. And what would happen if you took a look at UCR over the last 10 years?
That's the University of California, Riverside.
University of California, Riverside. They had books and books and books of all of this research that had been done, but they didn't go after any patents. And so there's a lot of activity right now going to the shelves, trying to find out over the past 10 years all these doctorates out there that had really good ideas and things that never went beyond the creation of a paper that got published. And so there's probably a lot of thought ideas there that can be commercialized. So we have a whole teams of people now that are revisiting all those papers and ideas and trying to see if some of those have merit and can be commercialized. So I think that's an aspect that's key for environments out there that have research universities.
And the other thing, Steve, I know you know, even though, again, you're a technology person by trade, you basically go out and you've reached out to this group called the CEO Forum, group of young CEOs and entrepreneurs, and tried to, again, bring them into the mix and introduce them to everybody on every side of the city, including, you know, your own department. And that's a conscious act, right? That's right, because
These private sector companies, they realize that a lot of these potential startup companies have similarity with products and services that they do. Right. And so they're willing to open up their doors in many cases, incubate them. For example, Bourne's Incorporated in Riverside, they do electronics manufacturing, they're worldwide distribution, they got a sales force all over. So now you bring in somebody that doesn't have any access to molding or prototyping or manufacturing anything or even shipping products and services out there, and they can leverage Bourne's, and they do. They all share the same common infrastructure that Bourne's does for creating their own products and services, and they're housed inside that organization and freely have security back and forth. So there's obviously levels of trust there, but they're growing their companies together, and they're sharing ideas and thoughts out there.
Yeah. Lev?
So it strikes me that the challenge, again, looking for the ingredients in the secret sauce, has to do with figuring out how to leverage the assets you have in the immediate community around you, and that's basically what you've just finished describing. I do think that one of the solid piece of ingredients that's in almost all of these stories around the world, and you can go look at the archive at ICF to kind of validate this working hypothesis I have, which is that colleges and universities are a bedrock. Absolutely. And there's something to fully take advantage of in all communities, whether you understand it as a key asset that you aspire to, aka the University of Waterloo opening up a new program in Startford, that being an important, or leveraging the core assets that you do have around the schools and universities. I'll just sort of give you a couple of obvious pieces and parts that relate to Northeast Ohio. Case Western Reserve, has a program out of its engineering school which is called ThinkBox. It's a maker community. It actually challenges students when they're engineers to put away the textbook first, and start rolling up their sleeves from day one and make stuff. And making stuff is something that Northeast Ohio has been doing for 150 years. And we have to find a way to get back into the maker economy and the maker culture along the way. And it doesn't just need to be engineering products, but there's an opportunity to get experiential learning enabled by the broadband infrastructure to create ThinkBox opportunities in which you can do some of that, the Norm was sharing 3D printing technology. Every kid, not every kid, multiple kids have built their own 3D printing infrastructure at the ThinkBox, and they take it back to their dorm room. And they're literally creating stuff. And they're looking then to partner with students from the Cleveland Institute of Art to actually figure out how to actually make it actually consumable in terms of a human factors analysis and user interface experiences. And then they're teaming in the same ecosystem, the same assets that they're drawing on, working with soundtracks, for example, for gaming technologies that are being developed at the Cleveland Institute of Music. Those are the kinds of, as it were, kind of virtuous circle that's possible once you articulate the assets that you want to be drawing upon. And one of the data points that's worth mentioning, I think, in the Cleveland context is today downtown Cleveland, not exactly the garden spot of America or of Northeast Ohio, has 0% vacancy for apartment dwelling. University Circle has just opened up 3 on demand for private developers, 3 new mid-range apartments for rental and for condos for the emerging creative class in University Circle. And the apartment rents are, excuse me, they look more like New York to me. But there's a demand for that kind of experience that's possible there. And it is a kind of momentum building effort. So it goes back, again, if I underscore these key ingredients from my perspective, it's finding the jewels, it's connecting the other key assets in the community, it's figuring out how to convene and catalyze, and then persistence. This does not happen overnight, and you have to be willing to stay the course on it. And communities that have been through tough times like ours, now that's a tough proposition sometimes, but stick-to-itiveness is something that, again, we know how to do in Northeast Ohio.
So connecting to that, I agree with you about assets, but we have really an underappreciated asset in my view. And I know it's really helped me, and I suspect it's helped Riverside overall, and that's the asset of an economic crisis. That's an asset. That's an opportunity. Because what happens is people actually allow you to do way more than if they had money. And we need to use that in a productive way. And so we've been able to make progress the last 4 years that, frankly, if we didn't have an economic crisis, we probably wouldn't be in exactly the same place. So again, it's how do you look at what you have and reevaluating even whether or not you may have assets in areas you don't think you do. Yeah.
Dan, look over to you on that one, because the asset that is always there is the human intelligence, right? That is, as Al Gore said, that's the endless resource that we can mine forever and ever and ever and never run out of if we do it right. This young woman talked about the creative class and all that. I get a little uncomfortable. I like Richard very much, but I get a little uncomfortable with this class that's out there, like a caste system. There's like these creative people, and then there's everybody else. There's cultural creatives, and we're all that because we're all part of a culture. You live in a community that thrives on the arts, but it's also a very creative place. Even your farmers are creative, right? And so how does that, again, have a layer of knowledge around it that allows people to move more fully into the middle class? How does that work?
I think I get what you want. Well, one of the things we've tried to do over time is Stratford's had to reinvent itself lots of opportunities, and we're makers just like you are. Predominantly, we have a huge manufacturing within our area, but we've had to convince people that every one of them is a knowledge worker, and that education is not a starting point with an end point. It's actually a journey. And Rick hit on a really good part. Former president of the University of Waterloo, now the Governor General of our country, told us back in 2008, 2009 that a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. He said, whatever you do, make sure that you use this opportunity to get people to do things they normally would never do. So what we've tried to do along the way is take traditional manufacturing people, and when they go for their retraining now, in our Partners of Employment program, it actually has to have a mandatory digital component to it. Not only typical computer skills, research skills, going out, finding things, bringing back, understanding programming or setting up. And we've started to create those individuals within that area to start thinking that they're a knowledge worker, that they can actually compete. And we've done the same with farmers. There's a lot of farmers in our area who now use GPS, global positioning satellites. They do everything online with their yield. They actually figure out how they're going to do it, and they get in the tractor and they hit start, and all they have to do is go down to one end of the field, and the equipment on the back knows when to pick up the seeder. They turn around, it knows when to drop it. It does all of those things. And they do this all the time. And now we have farming operations that are milking, we have one just outside of the city that milks 6,000 cows a day. It employs 42 people. They milk 24 hours. The cows have computer chips in their ear. They automatically come in. As it goes through, it reads it, says not time for Richard to be milked, send them back out. This one goes in. It automatically does it, tracks their production. Nancy, sorry. Yeah. I just couldn't resist. You're in the front row. Yeah, exactly. In a china shop, too. But one of the things was, when we did that, all of a sudden it started to create. So we now created that everybody's education level was coming up. And they all feel they're part of it. With that, farmers now are running tours for tourists. So they feel that they offer something in the new economy that they didn't offer before. And manufacturing facilities are now, really linked. We have a couple of them that are pretty high tech, that everything they do there, the workers do all the programming right in front of them, and they think of themselves as a knowledge worker. And that type of skill just builds, a sense of pride in the community, a sense of buy-in to where they think we're going, and in doing so, they're not intimidated by the University of Waterloo Digital Media Campus. We had that campus actually opened last Tuesday. 2,000 people went through that building. Community groups use that for their meeting space, and we've basically broken down, and we put people on campus all the time, and it's going to, over time, I think, really get people to start thinking that they're all in this together, and they all share it. We also have problem-solving opportunities where Power Noodle, which is a collaborative software piece that was started out of Stratford, allows online, so you put a problem out there, and the city used it for our budgeting. You don't get to know anybody's name. People can actually put their solution on. The computer then takes the 25 ideas, sorts them into 5 or 6 that are like-minded, rebuilds the problem, question goes on, and at the end it's outcome-driven. The world has enough problem identifiers. Problem solvers are in short supply. And we've started now to make everybody a problem solver and be part of the solution, and their pride factor and ownership comes up.
We'll take some, anybody else have a question right now? Or a comment? Yes. Wait for the microphone, Greg.
I heard the phrase data utility, Mayor, and I wondered if you could elaborate on that.
Well, we've created data, of course. Everyone's heard that data in the new economy are going to be king. Analytics of data and what it's done and what it's used for will help drive good government policy. So we've tried to create a utility which says, this is our pipe, this is our fiber. You can all come on it. You can do whatever you want. We still have Bell and Rogers and other companies, like you'd have Verizon and AT&T compete, but we've created a basic staple that everybody can ride on that is community owned, so that it's not always a fiscal question about connectivity and availability of information. It's a social question. It's a social piece that we believe everybody should have access to. So we operate it like it's a utility company. We figure out our costs, charge a rate. We're not in it necessarily to make gobs of money in our utility, our data utility. It's about social side of it. On the electric power side, we make a return on investment, we make profit, we pay dividends. But on the data side, we look at it as utility, cost recovery model, and the social component.
Lev, go ahead.
Can I just sort of add here that the destiny of the communities represented here were understood to be intimately connected to broadband futures. That's what the mayor's just finished sharing here. Not all communities realize that their destinies are connected. Many of them are prepared to essentially simply say, it's something we're prepared to give to the incumbent provider community. And as much as the incumbent provider communities are responsible for our telecommunications infrastructure in this country, I need to be the bearer of some reality check on this, right? The telecommunication giants that we used for broadband that provided us DSL, right, have been losing hundreds of thousands of subscribers every month because that technology is dead. They're losing it. DSL is, in terms of physics, in terms of what broadband capacity is actually possible, has capped out, topped off. Can't go any higher. Won't support the next generation of applications that want to ride on the infrastructure. You don't, and of course you hear that in Sweden and in Korea and in Eindhoven and in the Netherlands and now in Startford, you've got all kinds of enormously creative activities going on as a result of the leveraging the broadband. The alternative right now, and who's buying up all of our accounts and my own home account as well, is cable, right, with DOCSIS, right? There is also physical limits in the DOCSIS environment, which today we don't consume. And so we're kind of, well, but you know, that has a future. It'll last us at least another, what, 4 years, 5 years? Okay, let's be generous, 10 years. The physics of the copper and the physics of the way in which cable modem technology works are going to top out. And the alternative is fiber optics. Now we haven't called it in this afternoon's session, but what's being built out here is a utility leveraging fiber optics. And every community that wants to chart its own destiny has to think about how it's going to invest in fiber optic infrastructure, because it has a 50 or 60 year run rate. In Cleveland at Case Western Reserve, 34 years ago, we put in fiber optic infrastructure everywhere on the campus. We have a very long pathway for we have amortized and written down all of that investment over that period of time. And the only thing that we're changing out is the electronic impulses, the blinking light part. And that started when blinking lights could only move 1.5 lanes worth of traffic. And today I shared with you, it's already moving to 10,000. Earlier this week on Tuesday, we announced the first commercial business park in the middle of University Circle in the world that's delivering 100 gigs. Unprecedented. Why? Because the fiber optic infrastructure is already sitting there. It was just waiting for a company to figure out how to put 100 gigs down it. And now that it exists, they've come to the state of Ohio. Ohio has an enormous advantage through ORNet, our higher education academic research network. Cleveland, Cincinnati, and Columbus are all going to be connected at 100 gig. Now the challenge is to figure out how you're going to build out fiber optic infrastructure in your own communities to be able to connect to it, because, again, DSL is dead, and there is a very limited shelf life for the cable modem technology. I know it's a bit of tech talk, but I wanted you to hear it.
Thank you. But the bottom line is the new railroad is running through Ohio, right? So first of all, connect to it. And again, these guys will all tell you collaboratively how you can get connected to it, how your community can get connected to it, how these partnerships work. There's a million ways to skin that cat. But the most important thing is, how do you build applications on top of it? How to build applications, that's also technical. How do you use it for human purposes? Okay, so that's, if we didn't need technology, I don't think we'd even be talking about it. There'd be no discussion. But again, in order to advance our communities the way we want to, we need to be focused on getting that railroad down. I actually had a mayor come to me one time, and he said, he looked like an older guy, and he said, "Sonny, you tell me how this broadband's going to help me fill potholes." I said, "Well, Your Honor, it may not itself fill the pothole." I said, "But if you don't use it to create jobs and to make your citizens happy and to improve your schools and to improve your health care, I got a feeling you're not going to have anybody around to fill those potholes. And worse, you don't look like you're in great shape. You might have to fill them yourself if everybody leaves." So that's what's kind of at stake. And, you know, just to maybe we can conclude to talk about the government side of this, because you all work with it. You know, Will Rogers, the great satirist, once said, "Whenever you think life moves too fast, walk inside City Hall." But not true anymore in these communities. So let's go down the line and tell us what the city has done to enable the type of collaboration that has moved you guys toward becoming an intelligent community. What was the most single significant thing? Steve?
I think the single thing was our mayor. Our mayor was the kingpin. He was the individual that reached out to the private sector. We had a group of CEOs known as our CEO Forum, brought them to the table, came from the university system, so he knew all the colleges, brought all 4 of our colleges together.
That's right, he's a professor.
That's correct.
That's right.
So I think that was all key. I would say, just stepping back from the technology standpoint, I would just say that, you know, even though we're collaborating, I think it's all on execution now, and I think the biggest execution that we're doing now that's just bringing it all together is mobile applications. So every application 5 years ago was get it on your website. Today, if you don't have a mobile app to correspond with that, you're missing the boat, especially when you have a city with, in our case, 55,000 higher education students.
Yeah. The other thing is symbols are everything too, right, in government, in politics. If you've got an electric car because you guys are promoting alternative energy sources, guess where you can charge your electric car? Right at City Hall. They got a place where you can just plug in your electric car. So, you know, it sends out the signal that the government understands what its private sector and its academic sector are doing. And I just love that, that you can pull in your electric car in City Hall and plug in. Dan, obviously from your perspective, what was the single greatest act of collaboration that you're most proud of?
Well, I think the greatest well, first I'd say getting a plan, having everyone take part in it, and then accepting the fact that we didn't have all the answers, but we could compete. Joining groups like ICF, traveling to learn from other people, bringing technology companies in, and just continual collaboration. Accepting the fact that not every solution is going to come around a table of 11 elected officials or from a senior leadership staff of 11, that it could come from people in the community, could come from a community in Korea, could come from Eindhoven, and then using that information and partnering to make it happen. I'd say the continual collaboration is one of the things that I just see as probably key, and the fact that our community has this sense of world, I guess, you know, world being, world recognition, I think is the key part, and it's all because we realize that size doesn't matter and place doesn't matter. It's all in the way you think.
You bet. You're a global community. Lev, last word on that. In terms of where you sit at Case Western, what was your biggest accomplishment in collaborating with your local government?
Right. So just to underscore, government naturally has an enormous opportunity to convene. No one will turn down the mayor's invitation to show up, and that's part of our story. Early on, we had all kinds of saber rattling about this disruptive thing that these people at Case Western Reserve were planning to do. And a lot of saber rattling and boogeyman stories going out there. And the mayor not only convened, she actually helped to engage the CEOs from the healthcare systems, the museums, the libraries, because this is ours started off very much as a public sector activity. If we fast forward 10 years, while that was the city of Cleveland mayor, as everyone in this audience will know, we have 54 city mayors in Cuyahoga County, right? So if you fast forward 10 years, the real story, that we're telling right now is that the new executive of the county, Ed Fitzgerald, is our biggest champion, because he's seeing it from the whole county's perspective. While we were growing this one city at a time, Shaker Heights, City of Cleveland, Beechwood, Lakewood, working this bedly, hand in cup, going to every mayor to convene the local assets. Now Ed Fitzgerald's actually strategic plan, which is a 2012, started off as 2012, is now a 2022 plan, really is to essentially create a blueprint that involves shared services between all of the governments, to leverage the technology and to help us reinvent the entire region. So our new project, and which I hope you'll all be hearing about and maybe even be part of, is called the Smart Region. After all, that's what we are in Northeast Ohio, is a smart region.
Yep, thank you. And that's a trend that's taking place in our intelligent communities. President Ma of Taiwan has said that he not only wants now to designate more and more intelligent communities in Taiwan, he wants Taiwan to connect these communities to become an intelligent nation. So he's talking about harnessing the intelligence of the whole nation. and that's a remarkable thing. The collaboration continues city after city in the intelligent community movement. One of my favorite, I think, is Mrs. Kiyohara, the mayor of Mitaka, Japan, our 2005 Intelligent Community of the Year. She has formed no fewer than 86 committees. And those of us who don't like committees don't necessarily want to hear that, but they're very effective because they are always working together to collaborate and to feed each other information, which ultimately leads itself up to the mayor's office. And she's not afraid to be challenged by those committees. And it goes on every day of the week. 2007, Waterloo, Ontario was named Intelligent Community of the Year, won the Super Bowl, which is what a lot of communities do with our program, and then some of them walk away. They kept their Intelligent Community Committee together, which was headed by the founders of Research in Motion, the president of the university, and the public sector, the mayor, and every week or every month they meet and again talk about process improvement, because they just want to keep getting better and better and better and infinitely agile, because they know that this story never ends. So thanks for sitting here and listening to the stories of these three great communities. We're just at the beginning of this dialogue here, and I appreciate it. Thank you.